Stand on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and the monuments feel timeless, eternal, as if they've always been there, rising from the earth, fully formed like Athena from Zeus's head. The Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the reflecting pool stretching between them, Jefferson's Rotunda, the Vietnam Wall, they feel inevitable. Obvious, of course, these are here. Of course they look like this, but every single one of them was a fight. Political battles that lasted decades. Architectural competitions that sparked fury. Congressional deadlocks. Fundraising disasters. Public protests over destroyed cherry trees. Critics calling monuments scars and unpatriotic. Washington, D.C. is not accidental. It is a deliberately designed symbolic landscape. A civic religion in marble and granite. America's story told through architecture. But the question that's haunted the Capitol since 1791 is simple. Who gets to shape that story? I'm Keith Conrad, and this is Sidequests. Today, the 200-year fight over Washington's monuments. How a monument to George Washington took 40 years and nearly killed people. How the Lincoln Memorial sparked decades of Southern opposition. How a 21-year-old architecture student beat 1,400 competitors and then got called a traitor. And how the tension between democracy and monumentality, between Republican simplicity and imperial spectacle, has existed since the very beginning. 1791. The United States is 15 years old. The Constitution has been ratified. The government needs a capital, not New York. Too commercial, not Philadelphia, too tied to one state, something new, something symbolic, something that would embody the Republican experiment. Enter Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, French-born engineer who'd fought in the Revolutionary War. George Washington hired him to design the new Capitol, and L'Enfant had big ideas. Grand boulevards radiating from ceremonial centers, diagonal avenues cutting across a grid, vistas designed for monuments not yet built, Monumentacor that borrowed from Paris, from Rome, from every great capital in Europe. L'Enfant envisioned a city of marble and grandeur, a capital worthy of what he believed America would become. But there was immediate tension. America had just fought a war to reject monarchy. Imperial aesthetics made people nervous. European-style grandeur felt dangerous, too much like the kings and emperors they'd rejected. Thomas Jefferson wanted something simpler, more modest. Republican buildings for a Republican government. He sketched ideas himself. Low, classical structures, dignified but not ostentatious. The debate was fundamental. Can a democracy build monuments? Should it? Imperial capitals had triumphal arches, massive statues of emperors, temples to state power, but those were built by autocrats, monarchs, people who didn't have to ask permission. America wanted grandeur, something to prove the Republic could compete with European powers. But it feared what grandeur might mean. That building like an empire might become an empire. That tension, democracy versus monumentality, has never been resolved. It's been present in every monument built since, and the first test came with the most obvious memorial imaginable, honoring George Washington. December 14th, 1799, George Washington dies at Mount Vernon. The nation mourns, and immediately people start arguing about how to memorialize him. Congress debates, should it be a statue, a tomb, a pyramid, something unprecedented? They can't agree, so nothing happens. 1833 to 34 years after Washington's death, a private group forms, the Washington National Monument Society. They'll raise money themselves, build something worthy. The design they choose, an obelisk 555 feet tall, the tallest structure in the world. Simple, elegant, eternal. Fundraising begins. It goes poorly. Donations trickle in. $1 here, $5 there. States contribute blocks of stone, each carved with their seal. Foreign countries send stones too. The Pope sends a block from the Temple of Concord in Rome. Construction starts in 1848. Foundation goes in, the stones start rising, and then everything goes wrong. 1854, the anti-immigrant Know-Nothing Party, nativists who opposed Catholics and foreigners, takes over the Monument Society in a literal coup. They seize control of construction. They throw the Pope's stone block into the Potomac. Can't have Catholic stones in an American monument. Donations collapse. The public is furious. Construction grinds to a halt. Then the Civil War starts. 1861. The partially built monument, 152 feet tall, a stump, sits abandoned. Cattle graze around it. The Union Army uses it as a beef depot. For 25 years, the monument to George Washington sits unfinished. A national embarrassment, a symbol of dysfunction. Finally, in 1876, America's centennial, Congress appropriates funds to finish it. Federal funding, no more private fundraising disasters. They resume construction in 1879, but there's a problem. The original marble quarry has closed. They have to source stone from a different quarry, which is why if you look at the Washington Monument today, you can see a clear line about 150 feet up where the color changes. Different marble, different era. The monument's scar visible forever. The monument is finally completed in 1884, nearly 40 years from groundbreaking to dedication. Not because it was technically difficult, it's just a stone tower, but because building monuments in a democracy requires congressional approval, public campaigns, oversight commissions, political compromise, fights over funding, over design, over who controls the process. Even George Washington, the one figure everyone agreed deserved a monument, took 4 decades. April 15th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln is assassinated. The nation is devastated, and immediately the question, what kind of memorial? Some want a massive statue in the Capitol. Others want a Lincoln Highway, a transcontinental road bearing his name. Practical, useful, very American. Senator Lot Morrill proposes something else, a memorial building, a shrine, but where? The proposed site is swampland at the western end of the mall. Literally a swamp, malarial, undeveloped, far from the Capitol and the existing monuments. Critics call it a memorial in a mudflat. Too remote, too expensive. And then there's the political problem, Southern opposition. Lincoln won the Civil War. He's a hero in the North. But many Southerners see him as a tyrant. A memorial to Lincoln feels like the North imposing its version of history. The wound is too fresh. Congressmen debate for decades. Proposals come and go. Locations change. Designs change. Nothing gets built. Finally, in 1911, 46 years after Lincoln's assassination, Congress authorizes a memorial. Architect Henry Bacon designs a Greek temple. Classical, timeless, echoing the Parthenon. Inside, Daniel Chester French's sculpture of Lincoln seated, gazing east toward the Capitol and the Washington Monument. And between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument, they designed the reflecting pool. Nearly 2,000 feet long, perfectly symmetrical, creating a vista that connects the two monuments, that reflects Lincoln's temple in still water. The reflecting pool wasn't decorative, it was symbolic, designed to create reflection, serenity, visual harmony, to connect Lincoln to Washington, to transform a swamp into sacred space. The memorial is dedicated in 1922. Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's only surviving son, is present. He's 78 years old. He was at his father's deathbed in 1865. It took 57 years from assassination to memorial, 2 generations. Lincoln's son was a young man when his father died. He's an old man when the memorial opens. Not because anyone opposed honoring Lincoln, well, some did, but the bigger issue was the process itself. Where should it be? What should it look like? Who decides? Who pays? Democracy doesn't move fast, even when it wants to. Franklin Roosevelt loved monuments. He had strong opinions about architecture, about Washington's appearance, about how America should present itself, and he wanted a memorial to Thomas Jefferson. There was already a site picked out, the tidal basin across the water from the Lincoln Memorial. Architect John Russell Pope designed a rotunda echoing Jefferson's own architectural style. But there was a problem. The site was planted with cherry trees, the famous tidal basin cherry trees gifted by Japan in 1912. By the 1930s, they were beloved, a symbol of Washington's springtime. Building the memorial would require removing some of them. The public was furious. The protesters chained themselves to trees. Newspapers ran editorials. How dare they destroy these trees for a monument? FDR pushed anyway. But, and this is crucial, he worked through the system. Congress had to approve the memorial. The Commission of Fine Arts reviewed the design. The National Capital Planning Commission weighed in. Public hearings were held. FDR was powerful, popular, at the height of his influence, but even he couldn't just do it. He had to persuade, negotiate, accept compromises. The memorial was completed in 1943 during World War II. Some cherry trees were removed, yes, but most were preserved. The design was adjusted to minimize damage. The system worked, slowly, frustratingly, but it worked. 1979, Jan Scruggs, a Vietnam veteran, proposes a memorial to those who served in the war. He starts fundraising, grassroots donations, veterans contributing, no government money initially. A national design competition is announced, 1,421 entries, open to anyone. The winner, Maya Lin, a 21-year-old Yale architecture student. Her design, a black granite wall cut into the earth inscribed with the names of the dead. Simple, minimalist, powerful. And people hated it. Critics called it a black gash of shame, a scar, defeatist. Conservative groups accused Lin of dishonoring veterans. How dare she win? She's too young. She's Chinese American. What does she know about American sacrifice? The backlash was vicious, personal, cruel. Tom Carhart, a veteran and vocal critic, called it a degrading ditch. He wanted something traditional, heroic statues, flags, triumph. A compromise was reached. Lin's wall would be built as designed, but nearby they'd add a traditional bronze statue. 3 soldiers, realistic, heroic, both would exist. The abstract and the literal, the modern and the traditional. The wall was dedicated in November 1982, and something unexpected happened. People loved it. Veterans traced the names of fallen friends. Families left flowers, letters, dog tags. The black granite reflected visitors' faces. You see yourself among the names. The design, so controversial, became sacred. Today, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is one of the most visited monuments in Washington. Over 5 million people annually, more than the Lincoln Memorial. And it happened through a process. Public competition, debate, revision, compromise. Even when the initial choice sparked fury, the system forced conversation. Adjustment, a solution that honored both the vision and the critics. Maya Lin's design survived because the process, however painful, was democratic. Triumphal arches are ancient. Roman emperors built them to celebrate military victories, conquered territories, divine authority. The Arch of Titus, the Arch of Constantine. Massive stone declarations, I won, I rule. Napoleon built the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, nearly 165 feet tall, celebrating his military campaigns, his imperial ambitions. America has generally avoided triumphal arches. Not entirely. Cities built temporary arches for parades, for celebrations. The City Beautiful movement in the early 1900s proposed grand arches as part of urban redesign. But in Washington, the capital of a republic that rejected emperors and kings, no permanent triumphal arches celebrating executive power. Washington has memorials, obelisks, temples, museums, statues of generals, yes, but shared space, not imperial monuments. The closest might be the Macmillan Plan of 1901, a comprehensive redesign of the National Mall that proposed grand Beaux-Arts architecture. But even that went through a Senate commission, congressional approval, decades of implementation, public input, because the fear has always been if you build like an emperor, you might become one. Every monument in Washington tells 2 stories. The first is the story it commemorates: Washington, Lincoln, Jefferson, veterans. The second is the story of how America chose to build it. And that second story, historically, has involved argument, delay, public debate, compromise. The Washington Monument took 40 years. The Lincoln Memorial took 57. The Vietnam Wall sparked fury before becoming sacred. Even powerful presidents, FDR, pushing hard for Jefferson's memorial, worked through institutions, accepted oversight, negotiated compromises. Maybe that process itself, slow, frustrating, democratic, became part of what made the monuments American. Not declarations from on high, but hard-won consensus, messy, human, ours. Washington was designed to honor presidents. Whether it becomes a canvas for them is a question each generation has to answer.